You are listening to Lessons Learned number 15. All right, we're going to get right into it. This week's Lessons Learned is that unity will always require some level of compromise and some level of humility. Obviously, we know that we've been talking about weeks on end that I just feel like humility has got to be the foundation of our leadership. It has to be. It has to be. Because our pride can so easily sneak in and cause us to go off the rails. When we are on a team, we've got to find a way to be unified. Being unified does not mean that we are always going to agree. Here's what you have to decide. What hill are you going to die on? What will you not compromise on? And then you've got to be willing to compromise on just about anything else. This is why, again, I believe establishing core values, establishing mission, establishing who you are, help your team to align on what hills we as a group are going to die on. What are we going to do? With preference, we've got to be willing to lay those down for the sake of the team and for the sake of unity. It is never comfortable. I've heard it said, and I agree, unity does not mean uniformity. We've all got to be able to bring our gifts to the table and bring our preferences to the table and then figure out what's best for the team and what aligns most with our mission and with our values. But know that if we are going to be unified, it's going to require us to not always get our way, to not always do what we originally wanted to do. We've got to be willing to go to the table with our team and then figure out what's best for our team. And we've got to be willing, even as the leaders, even as the ones sitting in that chair of leadership, whether you're the head coach, whether you are the boss, the CEO, the project manager, whatever it may be, we've got to be willing to come to the table and say, all right, not my way. And that is so much easier said than done. Figure out right now what hill you are going to die on. So for us at Hanover, we've said it multiple times, that's our mission and our values, the CHIP values, and then our mission of building better husbands and better fathers who show up, love, and don't quit. So something that I constantly battle, is not just coaching the way that I've been coached, but continually pursuing the way that I believe I've been called to coach. And I've been called to coach in this way that builds unity, that builds purpose-driven individuals, both coaches and players. So sometimes a lot of the times that requires me laying down preferences for the sake of the team. So let me give you an example of what's a non-negotiable versus what's preference, okay? Non-negotiable. The way we do certain things with our finishing through lines and finishing drills and having a very intense practice. So we talk about our practices being loud, competitive, and efficient. What is negotiable is how we get there. My brother and I, we run an underground huddle with a couple times a year. We'll bring different leaders on. It usually some type of overlap between sports and leadership. The most recent one we brought on John Fossil. We call him Coach Bones. And he was my special teams coach with the Rams. He gave an unbelievable amount of freedom to the players, which it is not typical of an NFL coach. It wasn't do it this way all the time, no matter what. He said, hey, here's our practice philosophy. Here's what it takes to be on special teams. Here's our standards on how we're going to operate on special teams. But as far as how to get there, if you want to use this stance versus this stance, great. What feels good to you? And it was constant conversation. And that brought freedom and that brought unity. And when you are striving for unity, you're going to have to lay down some preferences. So, establish what hills you're going to die on. What are your core values? What are your mission? What hills personally are you going to die on that you believe, no matter what, are best? And then be willing, for the sake of unity, for the sake of your team, for the sake of ownership, for the sake of freedom, for the sake of joy, be willing to lay down preferences. We've got to continually be challenging ourselves to not make this about us. This is our lessons learned. Thanks so much for listening.